All right, let's get right into it. For, decades, the rules of global power seemed pretty straightforward. They were written by countries with the biggest armies and the oldest alliances. But what if that entire playbook is being torn up as we speak?
That's the big question we're tackling today. Because if you think the answer is still just about presidents, military pacts, and government budgets, well, you might be missing the most important part of the story. You see, the real centers of power are shifting under our feet, creating this totally new, kind of complex map of who's in charge. So let's break down who the new players are and, more importantly, what they really want. Okay, first up, let's look at the traditional pillars of the global order, those big military alliances. Because even here, in what seems like the most stable part of the old world, some serious cracks are starting to show. And they reveal two completely clashing ideas about the future.
So on one side, you've got a vision like the one from French President Emmanuel Macron. He's basically arguing for a Europe that takes control of its own security, building a stronger, more independent defense force within NATO, a real partnership of equals.
But that's just one side of the coin. A recently leaked Pentagon email shows a completely different and honestly a much more hardcore vision of how the alliance should work. It's not about partnership at all. It's about compliance. It's a purely transactional deal where American protection comes with a very steep price. Absolute, unquestioning loyalty.
And listen, this isn't just tough talk. The leak lays out actual punishments for allies who don't get on board with a potential US-led war with Iran. We're talking about suspending Spain from key NATO jobs for not letting the US use its air bases, and even threatening to pull support for the UK's claim to the Falkland Islands. And the stated goal, right there in black and white? To send a crystal clear message and end what the document calls a European sense of entitlement. All this friction inside these old alliances, it really begs a massive question. While all these nations are busy arguing about military strategy, is it possible the real power game is already being played on a totally different field? And that brings us to the second huge piece of this puzzle. Because while governments are busy debating their roles, a new kind of giant is already out there reshaping the world with a whole different kind of weapon. We're talking about massive, privately controlled money. The numbers here are just mind-blowing. I mean, take SpaceX. It's in the middle of refinancing a $20 billion loan. Think about that for a second. That single financial move by one private company is larger than the entire yearly economic output of dozens of countries. And this is where you can really see the new global arms race playing out. It's not just about missiles anymore. It is all about technology. Huawei is dumping $10 billion into self-driving research. At the exact same time, SoftBank is borrowing $10 billion, using its shares in OpenAI as collateral. These are enormous private bets on who's going to control the tech of our future.
Right, and this new tech power, it isn't just some abstract idea floating around in Silicon Valley. It's having a direct and really dramatic impact on the economy, and specifically on people's jobs. We're seeing what you could call a great workforce shuffle. On the one hand, you have huge companies like Microsoft and Nike letting go of thousands of experienced and, let's be honest, expensive employees. But on the other hand, a company like Infosys is gearing up to hire 20,000 fresh graduates. The logic here is pretty clear. In the age of AI, a lot of companies think it's easier and cheaper to train a new, adaptable workforce from the ground up than to retrain a generation that's set in its ways. And this chart just lays it all out, plain and simple. Over on the left, you see thousands of veteran roles at places like Microsoft and Nike just gone. Then on the right, you see a company like Infosys creating tens of thousands of new jobs, specifically for a generation that grew up with this technology. The scale of this change is just huge. So what happens when you put these two giant stories together? On one side, you have these cracking geopolitical alliances. On the other, the insane rise of the tech titans. How in the world do they connect? And what does it all mean for us? Well, the connection gets really clear when you look at how even the old-school alliances are having to change. Take the partnership between France and Greece. It started back in 2021 as a classic defense pact, right? But look at it today. It's expanded to cover cooperation on energy, digital services, and artificial intelligence. Power is no longer just defined by who has the most warships. It's defined by microchips, energy grids, and financial markets. This table pretty much sums up the entire shift. In the old power play, the key players were just nation-states. Simple. Now, it's a mix of nations and tech giants. The arena used to be military alliances.
Now, it's global markets and the race for AI. And the actual currency of power, it shifted from just military might to this potent mix of capital and technology. So at the end of the day, here's the biggest takeaway. These two worlds are now completely tangled up with each other. You simply cannot separate geopolitical influence from technological dominance anymore. To be a major power on the world stage today, a country has to be a leader in technology and innovation, period. Which leaves us with one final and pretty profound question. In this new world, where corporations have budgets bigger than most nations and alliances are being redefined by tech just as much as treaties, who actually gets to write the rules for the 21st century? Is it the governments we elect? Or is it the tech titans who are actively building our future?